Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Rochford Files. And this is your host, Andrew Rochford, on May Day of 2022. And that is a good day to have a live stream on. So I'm still a bit behind on getting all the plugs out. But I wasn't feeling streaming yesterday. So I decided to go with today instead. That felt more right. So just gotta go on the Rochford Files Twitter page, spread the stuff out, and we'll be good to get started here. Hopefully it's been a good weekend for y'all. Just been here watching a lot of the anti-imperialist summit through the Revolutionary Blackout Network. So just been pretty chill here. And now it's time to go in on the whole Ministry of Truth that just started to pop off uh, in the middle of the week last week. So about to put the article up on the screen, written by Benjamin Norton of Multipolarista. So let's go try to mainly focus in on some of the key points after I start off with a few paragraphs. The U.S. government has created what is essentially a ministry of truth. It is led by a censorial Cold War warrior who worked for a CIA cutout overseeing regime change operations targeting Russia and Belarus, who smear independent anti war American media outlets as supposed Russian disinformation. This new U.S. information czar has also denounced whistleblowing journalistic publication WikiLeaks as scum, claiming without evidence that it is a part of a supposed Russian operation that spread so-called malinformation. Washington's de facto Ministry of Truth will be overseen by the Department Homeland Security, which is infamous for violating civil liberties in the name of the so-called war on terror. The ACLU has warned of DAH's authoritarian tendencies and called for it to be dismantled, noting the department's use of horrific tactics against protesters. The ACLU wrote that the short history of DHS has been filled with violence, the stoking of fear, and a lack of oversight. In 2018, DHS published a press release that echoed the white supremacist 14-word slogan used by neo-Nazis. And as you notice right now, a lot of these type of people are trying to water down the type of people that the United States is sending weapons to right now in Ukraine. They are clearly, obviously Nazis. And they're trying to water it down with language like far right, alt right, neo Nazis. And that's just a poor use of justification on their part to send a total of 36 billion to help Ukraine. Instead of reining in the scandalous department, oh, shout out to We're Carrying Signs. Good to see you back. Instead of reining in the scandalous department, the US government is giving DHS even more power over Americans' freedom of speech. On April 27, 2022, DHS announced the creation of a disinformation governance board, which said it would be dedicated to combating so-called Russian disinformation. CIA Director William Burns had admitted back in a Senate Intelligence Committee hearing in March that the United States is waging an information war on Russia and boasted that President Vladimir Putin is losing. And anyone who's actually connected to what's going on there knows that Ukraine is the one that's struggling in this battle right now, and this would be a terrible idea for them to keep this war going on when what they should be doing is waving the white flag and trying to come to the table for a diplomatic solution, which is something that Russia has been open to. DHS's new Disinformation Governance Board is part of U.S. government information war, which in turn is a key front in Washington's new Cold War on both Russia and China. In the guise of fighting supposed Russian disinformation, this notoriously authoritarian U.S. institution is threatening to impose more censorship tactics on critics of Washington's foreign policy. It has recruited a hardline information warrior to lead these efforts. And this is the main face of this. This is Nina Jankowicz. For some reason, she doesn't even have her name pronounced with the original accent, like if that were the case, it'd be Yankovic. To run this disinformation governance board, the Biden administration selected a fanatical Cold War warrior, Nina Jankowicz. Jankowicz claims to be an expert on so-called disinformation. In reality, she is an anti-Russia information warrior who has extensive experience working for the U.S. and Ukrainian governments, including a shady CIA cutout. This newly appointed director of DHS and Disinformation Governance Board has smeared independent media outlets that expose crimes committed by the U.S. government abroad as vehicles for Russian disinformation, and has clearly suggested she supports censoring. So I think this is the point where I can go down through the rest of the article and pretty much go through the photos showing the instances of Jankowicz calling for that censorship. So this is a photo right here showing where Jankowicz was before. She used to work for Democracy Works. When Donald Trump won the 2016 U.S. presidential election, the Democratic Party hatched a conspiracy theory that blamed Russia for Hillary Clinton's loss. Many Democratic operatives in Washington subsequently transitioned their careers to cash in on the counter-disinformation racket. Jankowicz moved away from democracy assistance and rebranded herself as an expert on so-called Russian disinformation. She moved to Ukraine and began working for its new right-wing, viciously anti-Russian government, which had been installed after a violent U.S.-sponsored 2014 coup, the one that all these people at the same breath are denying ever happened. Jankowicz boasts on her website from 2016 to 17, she advised the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry on disinformation and strategic communications. Jankowicz's work for Ukraine's post-coup regime was sponsored by Fulbright Clinton Public Policy Fellowship. After a year in Ukraine, Jankowicz was given a cushy position as a disinformation fellow at the Wilson Center, a hawkish U.S. government-funded think tank that advocates for an aggressive foreign policy. Back to it. There, Jankowicz worked on churning out anti-Russian information welfare for the Kennan Institute, named after the infamous Cold War warrior George F. Kennan, a U.S. diplomat who helped create containment policy toward the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, Jankowicz spread disinformation of her own, citing U.S. spies to repeatedly claim that the leak of files from Hunter Biden's laptop was part of a Russian disinfluence op. The authenticity of these files was later confirmed by both the New York Times and the Washington Post. The same Hunter Biden laptop incident, which all these liberal outlets were trying to sweep under the rug and ignore. That way they could make sure to not put anything out that would sway people at the last moment to not vote for Joe Biden. That's what that was about. And then you even had outlet that's supposedly lefty, like The Intercept, and they even went along with it. And that was the pretty much the breaking point of why Glenn Greenwald eventually resigned from The Intercept. Jankowicz also sees her targets on independent anti-war outlets, smearing them as Russian information. And here's the tweet that shows Jankowicz calling WikiLeaks unbiased. Stop calling them unbiased. Start calling them what they've always been, scum. And this is just because these liberals, Democratic operatives in Washington got mad the moment that the Julian Assange and WikiLeaks started to uh, put journalism out that showed the Democratic Party in an unfavorable light. They were pro WikiLeaks when they were exposing the Bush war crimes. And right now, Julian Assange looks to be rotting away and as a political prisoner with a hard road ahead to ever survive this. Yes, that's right, Kelly. Yeah, good to see you're back here for another show as well. And sorry if I'm a bit slow to see comments while I'm reading articles because I've only got one screen on me at the moment. Let's go to this next photo where she says, I have Aaron Mate blocked because the gray zone is a source of disinfo itself, just implicated in a Russian disinfo op as of today, as a matter of fact. Then she has some sycophant apply to her. I don't doubt it. I'm aware of his outlet's issues, and I don't use them as one of my news sources. I've just seen him counter the Russian hysteria in the American media over the past 2 years, primarily a function of the left. Mike Taibbi has done a good job in calling it out. Gray Zone creates their own hysteria and spreads incredibly damaging disinformation. It calls popular protests color revolutions and paper over Stalinist crimes against humanity. They're not a reputable on countering Russian hysteria. This is hilarious. We know that there's plenty of moments that have been like psyops on the people, like Cuba and Ukraine, where we got rallies having liberals advocate for the Azov battalion, where we had real popular protest in defense of Cubans of their current government, and not just a small faction of the white Cubans in Miami or Florida in general. Now, this one goes after another journalist, Ben Swan, who, by the way, was right on the whole Syria and white helmets thing. This is her quote tweeting it. This is exactly the type of BS that noted conspiracy theorists like Ben Swan should not be allowed to purchase ads to promote. Then the video that the the description for the video is the U.S. no longer funding the White Helmets. Let's give it a check. And this is another thing that the Gray Zone was among the outlets that got right. While you had the liberals melt down over it, including even some of our dipshit bread tubers on the left, like Vosh, even melt down over people who take stances like Mate and Blumenthal over the Syrian uh, gas attacks and the White Helmets. And in that example, they Vosh type did a very poor job of hedging on that issue. Similarly, Jankowicz has repeatedly rejected the undeniable historical fact that the U.S. government backed a violent coup in Ukraine in 2014, calling it Russian disinformation. While Jankowicz markets herself as a disinformation expert, in reality, she is a devoted soldier in the U.S. government's information war on Russia. In 2020, Jankowicz made her status known as an information warrior clear as day, publishing a book titled How to Lose the Information War, Russia, Fake News, and the Future of Conflict. You could literally sell a shit ton of books on anything. And they don't even have to be based in fact. They could just be this garbage propaganda like this. While Jankowicz frequently smears Cuba, Venezuela, Russia, and other targets of U.S. foreign policy as authoritarian, and even accuses Cuba and Venezuela of supposedly meddling in U.S. elections, when the case is it's really the opposite. She had no problem working for an authoritarian right-wing regime in Ukraine. Let's see, yeah, I think that's a good stopping point, and it gets to the crux of the important point of how disturbing this ministry of truth is, and what the scary type of goals it would be, which is to take down adversary journalism who challenges state narratives. And in this current issue right now, President Zelensky in Ukraine has successfully defeated uh, taking down opposition parties and other forms of media in Ukraine, and that's the wet dream that these U.S. liberals have here in the United States. Yep, that's right. But now I'm going to give you a warning on this next video. This is going to be a very hard watch, but this is going to be really cringe, but it's important to show the type of personality this Nina Jankowicz has.
Laundering is really quite ferocious. It's when a huckster takes some lies and makes them sound precocious by saying them in Congress or a mainstream outlet. So disinformation's origins are slightly less atrocious. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. When Rudy Giuliani shared that intel from Ukraine, or when TikTok influencers say COVID can cause pain, they're laundering disinfo, and we really should take note and not support their lies with our wallet, voice, or vote. Oh, information laundering is really quite ferocious. It's when a huckster takes some lies and makes them sound precocious by saying them in Congress or a mainstream outlet. So disinformation's origin seems slightly less atrocious.
So my apologies for that moment of killing any type of positive energy that you could have, whether it's optimism, happiness, killing libido over having to show y'all that 45 seconds of Mary Poopins, that verbal diarrhea in the form of a classic movie. But that's not it for this segment. Now, next, I'm going to tie in this into the recent Daily Beast article by Matthew Forrester, smearing a few of the anti-war lefty voices. So I'm not going to get into that article at all because it doesn't deserve to get read in any type of light. So this is what the Ministry of Truth wants. They want useful idiots like Matthew Forrester to smear anti-war voices like Samira Khan, Max Blumenthal, Lee Camp, Ben Norton, and Danny Haifa. So this, just to give y'all a quick recap of what that article was, it was just a summary of pretty much all their takes, the notable ones that are, on the since this conflict has gone on between Russia and Ukraine, and pretty much the Forrester being upset at the fact that they're saying something that he doesn't agree with, and using the typical uh, State Department smear of defending dictators because anti-imperialist voices don't accept that as a fact when the United States calls another country a dictatorship, where we find that most of the time they're doing some form of misleading when instead of it being defense. And it pretty much followed up with a bunch of cop-like behavior where it turned into, oh, here's all the things with these people I all disagree with. Now, this is why they need to be deplatformed and banned. And you saw that towards the end of the article when Forrester focused on Max Blumenthal. That was when the cop-like behavior peaked, when Max changed his mind, decided to get more into the COVID coverage late last year, and joined along with Jimmy Dore on that. And Forrester used that as a reason to why he should be banned from ever having a platform to do journalism. So this is an example of the type of shit where this is what the Ministry of Truth wants. They want useful tools like the Daily Beast to act as a extensive propaganda arm for them. And just know that if you are getting smeared in the Daily Beast, it's usually a badge of honor whenever you do, because that's a sign that you're saying some form of truth and you're making some people upset. And this comment from Recurring Science. Hard to believe America is exactly where the Russians were in the early 80s with our DHS/TSA, with this new Ministry of Disinformation. According to Hollywood, i.e. Firefox, Red Heat. Thanks so much for that comment. I think this is a good point to transition into the next segment, which will be on Nina Turner and her deciding to come out against anti-BDS. So I'm about to post the photo from that article she took out in a local Cleveland newspaper to make that statement. So thanks to Nick Cruz of Revolutionary Blackout Network for sharing this. Nina Turner is against the BDS, but I'm supposed to be cheering for this sellout? Turner last week published an open letter in the Cleveland Jewish News, the largest Jewish publication, pledging support for Israel and explaining she is opposed to the boycott, sanctions, and divestment movement. So first off, I think, before I get further into it, good point, Kelly. And I'd like to add this as well to the Lee Camp situation. Isn't it coincidental once Lee Camp announced that he would continue his form of redacted tonight on Mint Press News, and then shortly after that, Mint Press News's PayPal gets suspended? And another quick comment from We're Carrying Signs. If you fly, you know what I mean. The portrayal of travelers in the Russian air power. But I wanted to point out that highlighted quote for a moment because I think the left is having a good moment of growth here because during the Jamal Bowman campaign, uh, there wasn't very much of the left uh, highlighting this type of stuff. There was only a small amount because I believe even in that campaign, Jamal Bowman was anti-BDS. And we just also let it slide as well when Barack Obama came out to endorse Jamal Bowman, and he even clouded that endorsement. Though she's opposed to legislation against BDS activities, just as I would not support the sanctions on us because of the actions of our government, it is not appropriate in this circumstance to place sanctions on Israelis for their government's actions, the paid ad reads. And this is the problem with the electoral system right now in America. You've got progressives who excuse this as, oh, it's just a good political strategy not to alienate Jewish people. But the problem is you're throwing Palestinians under the bus when you decide to give them less than full solid support as they're going through genocide being done by the Israelis. And this is the type of thing that you see the white left have a major issue with, is the fact that they're like the gif of that dog sitting on the table with fire all around it. Yeah, that's right. And you wonder why the energy of the left to support Nina Turner has been sapped. It's because uh, it's self-inflicting. And the fact that she's not as genuine progressive fighter that she used to sound like back when she was part of the Bernie Sanders campaign, when she could have potentially been part of the People's Party or of another third party or just independent in general. Israel gets X% of our entire foreign aid budget, a lot closer to 150 than how many third world countries out there. And this is why I say that Israel is the imperialist right-hand man of the United States. And with the way things are going for Ukraine, they're like the imperialist left-hand man now. But a big theme of this anti-imperialist summit is the fact that there's people who take foreign policy very seriously and they aren't willing to compromise on this. There's white lefties, progressives, sock dems, whatever you like to call them. They're willing to compromise on foreign policy if it means that they'll get health care and you get wages kind of raised, even if it's still not close to uh, thriving wages. Then the fact that they may talk like they're in support of defund the police, but they'll probably ch- check out if they just got one significant economic victory. But when you're anti-imperialist, we see how foreign policy and domestic policy are very connected, and that if you're not serious about foreign policy, you're definitely never going to see the domestic policy breakthroughs that they like to focus on so much when they uh, can be indifferent on State Department funding. They may be upset about feign outrage at times at the budget for military and the support for Ukraine goes up. But do we really find that genuine? Especially when a lot of the times their foreign policy takes are pretty much hedging at best. And this is one of the biggest things that I've really learned in these past couple years is how serious foreign policy is to the struggle here, and how with the empire that the United States has built, harassing over 80 other countries with some active war, sanctions, that this is all interconnected. And even though that there's European NATO countries that they do have better social safety nets in their countries, I think there's this naive belief that we could have a couple of big social safety nets and still be the imperialist superpower of the world. But with the way this government is, no chance in hell that's going to happen. And it's easy to dismiss white people at times who take foreign policy very seriously. But when you see the progressives, but when an actual person from a marginalized community says similar things, they they can't come back from that. They don't have a good comeback to when Palestinians or Cubans, Syrians, Haitians, Brazilians that live in the United States, and they come back at them talking about how seriously foreign policy means to them. They do not have it for them. But when it comes to this point, who's a better person and more useful to turn things around for a revolution? Is it the Sokdim who mainly uh, focuses on domestic policy Yes, that point exactly, Kelly. Or is it the some type of libertarian or self-labeled right-winger who takes foreign policy and U.S. imperialism reporting very seriously? Someone like a Gonzalo Lira, who on George Galloway last week labeled himself as a center right. And there's quite a few of these libertarian center right anti imperialist reporters. And guess what? Those libertarian right wing anti imperialist reporters are far more useful for the revolution and liberation of marginalized people abroad than the sock dim who hardly talks about foreign policy. And that's a great point to be made here because what we do know is even if Nina Turner never tried to do this type of hedging in order to placate to the Jewish population in Cleveland, we knew that even if she gets into office, it was going to be hedging and placating based on her actions once if she does get into Congress. So next, oh, if we fully funded mental health care, where would our Congress, Senate, and White House be? Good point. We're carrying signs now. Next, it's time to go in. Trevor Noah last night appeared as the comedian for the White House press dinner, something that we hadn't seen outside of the only the first year in the Trump administration. But then liberal comedians ruined it for the other three. So about to get this Trevor Noah cringe up.
Every single one of you, whether you like it or not, is a bastion of democracy. And if you ever begin to doubt your responsibilities, if you ever begin to doubt how meaningful it is, look no further than what's happening in Ukraine. Look at what's happening there. Journalists are risking and even losing their lives to show the world what's really happening. You realize how amazing it is. Like in America, you have the right to seek the truth and speak the truth, even if it makes people in power uncomfortable, even if it makes your viewers or your readers uncomfortable. You understand how amazing that is? I stood here tonight and I made fun of the President of the United States, and I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna be fine, right? Do you really understand what a blessing it is? Maybe it's happened for so long that it might slip your mind. It's a blessing. In fact, here, ask yourself this question. Honestly, ask yourself this question. If Russian journalists who are losing their livelihoods, as you were talking about, Steve, and their freedom for daring to report on what their own government is doing, if they had the freedom to write any words, to show any stories, or to ask any questions, if they had basically what you have, would they be using it in the same way that you do? Ask yourself that question every day, because you have one of the most important roles in the world. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
My bad, I was muted. Far, you're right, Kelly. We're a far cry away from the days of when we had decent adversarial comedians doing political coverage, like Jon Stewart back when he was on The Daily Show, and even Stephen Colbert was far closer to a Jon Stewart. And now there he's in a race with Trevor Noah, Jon Stewart are racing each other to become the most cringe shitlib comedians as propaganda arms for the United States right now. Yeah, we're carrying signs. It was very unfortunate that this was the guy who replaced Jon Stewart. Wasn't even watching The Daily Show Stewart last year, not nor the other Colbert, right? At least Jon Stewart sounds pretty similar to what he was back then. I don't. He's probably gonna have more flaws than back in those days, but I don't. I also don't have Apple TV, so I don't know how his current show is like. Oh, yeah, I'm waiting. And I also saw when someone share uh, some comedy bit where uh, Trevor Noah was pro-fascist and on the side of police against the protesters. I'm not going to play that one because to avoid the copyright, but that is uh, insane, and it goes to show you that this is what the that press dinner has become now. You used to have something a bit more balanced in terms of comedians. They used to seem more principled, but now you've only got a tiny handful of comedians out there who have any type of uh, independent thought, for better or worse. Just because I know that there's also independent right wing comedians who have that type of independence, even though we won't agree on much. Agreed. I can't. There's so many comedians that I used to feel were funny back before I really s- saw the light on the liberals and Democrats and moved further left. Even, and that includes Bill Maher as well, who is someone who used to give some pretty good, who gave moments of decent criticism slightly to the left of the Democratic Party. And now he gives shitty criticism of the Democrats, which should to pull them even further right. And he tries to argue that they've moved to that he still hasn't moved to the right himself, when essentially Bill Maher is just a right wing libertarian who likes weed. And I'm going to say for this next part, I think this is the first time in years that I haven't watched any single part of the NFL draft at all. And I'm usually the type of person, if I do watch, it's just mainly the first round and a bit of the second round. But this year, not a single second was spent on that. And thanks to Nick for showing this clip yesterday during that Jimmy Dore interview on RBN. But get a load of this cringe propaganda that took place before the NFL draft even started on Thursday.
A Vegas-based duo, the Skating Aratas. Jenny is from Kyiv, Ukraine, and has been raising funds for children back in her home country.
Sorry, Kelly.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having me here tonight. It has been extremely difficult for us to watch from so far away the destruction of our home and to talk to my friends and family members who remained in Ukraine. Throughout this devastation, I'm inspired by the strength and unity of our people. We remain humbled by the outpouring of support from the entire world and all over the USA. Thank you for standing with us in solidarity as we continue to fight for freedom. God bless America. Glory to Ukraine.
Yeah, that's right. They're just being offered money and they don't even have to ask. Well, we just want stuff like universal health care, thriving wages. Among the examples, liberation for all marginalized communities, land back, and they don't even have, and they just get offered money and yes, we'll take it. Pretty much, they're getting the budget surplus for that. But if I was one of those guys on the stage and I was about to, on the verge of being on an NFL selected by an NFL team, I couldn't have not stood up there for that shit. I mean, I'm either got a hand over my face palming during that moment, or I'm walking off the stage. Because that's the example of the painfulness of moments like that. But I've got another NFL related clip to go to for this next segment. So Mark Davis, the owner of the Las Vegas Raiders, finally said something positive on Colin Kaepernick, and this is honestly the first one of the first positive things an owner has said about Colin Kaepernick since his protest that took place in 2016.
Kaepernick, you have been on record saying that you would be open to him becoming a Raider if the coaching staff felt that he was able to contribute to this team. Where do you stand that Colin is going around and basically trying to show people that he can still play football?
Listen, I believe in Colin Kaepernick, and he deserves every chance in the world to become a quarterback in the National Football League. I still stand by it. If our coaches and general managers want to bring him in or want him to be the quarterback on this team, I would welcome him with open arms. I think Colin's a very misunderstood human being. I've gotten a chance to talk to him. I never really knew Colin, and I didn't understand him, and I didn't understand the kneeling, what that meant initially. Over time, I have learned a little bit more about it, and I understand where he was coming from, and he's got a message for society as a whole. There's people that I'm very close with. Tommy Smith is somebody who back in 1968 made a nonviolent gesture to let people know that, yeah, I might have won the gold medal, but there's a lot of problems left back in America that we got to fix. And I think in the same vein, Colin Kaepernick has sacrificed a lot of the things that he could have been doing in his life, and to get a message across about police violence and equity and inclusion in America. And I stand by that.
I have 2 minutes to go on this.
So you notice how convenient it is for Mark Davis to come out and say something positive about Colin Kaepernick now? Did it really take you Kelly, nice. Did it really take you nearly 6 fucking years to get the point of what Colin Kaepernick was trying to protest for in 2016? And the fact that there were no white people willing to come out and back him at that time. Then 2017, when Donald Trump had that rally comment to get those sons of bitches off the field, then you started to see a few more white NFL players start to make comments of support to Colin. But come on. Then even in 2020, when some of this stuff resurfaced again with the George Floyd protest, even then it was late and much more convenient and comfortable for the white athletes in America to come out and support Colin Kaepernick, when if you honestly weren't doing it from the beginning, then it really showed how late it was, because ownership around the NFL has pretty much made it a sealed case closed type decision that he's virtually going to get no chance to play again. And even if you think he's starting to get too old now, remember when he was in the NFL, he had the talent of a mid-level quarterback who could play himself solidly into the top 10 if you had the right pieces of talent around him. And even if you try to account for decline that you would have if he had played 5 more seasons after that 2016 season, what would he be at worst? A lower third starting quarterback? So the amount of liberals who have bought into the conservative arguments of him not being talented enough to belong in the are bunk, to be honest, because given how few quality transformative franchise quarterbacks come into the NFL each year, and you think that he wouldn't be able to last. Exactly, Kelly. That's the point I'm trying to make. The reason why they're saying it now is because it's extremely convenient. And that if they had done this when this was a big hot button controversy, they couldn't handle the negative press from all their conservative fan base and all their performative outrage videos of them burning their fan gear when they've already paid for it. But that, and the fact that they're always the detractors always got a way to try to blame him whenever Colin had an opportunity, like back when the NFL had set up an open tryout for Colin on a Saturday, when most of the NFL wasn't even going to send anyone to watch him throw, when those things traditionally happen on a Tuesday. And so I don't blame him for not being willing to compromise on that, because it's a slanted game for Colin if he ever does get to come back. And these are merely empty lip service, especially when Mark Davis brings up that former Olympian Tommy Lee. So when you do that, you tell me that you you knew what he was standing for at that time, and you were just being willfully ignorant. Hey, Uncle Warren, what's up? Good to see you've hopped in. So the last story of the night will be the Jerry West looking to sue HBO over his portrayal in that Showtime Lakers series. And the reason why I'm covering this is because Jerry West wants to use political capital for this shit. So even back when I was a full-blown liberal, I always found it to be extremely stupid how sports could take up so much political capital in Supreme Court and whatnot, even though I know that they're part of the same type of class structure, which makes it easier for them to break into that type of system. Jerry West goes after HBO over winning time depiction, claims he'll take issue to Supreme Court if I have to. And this is over the depiction of the series Winning Time, The Rise of the Lakers Dynasty. As the LA Times reports, Clippers executive and Lakers icon has once again blasted the series after HBO was forced to defend its dramatization of the Showtime Lakers. In a recent chat with Bill Dwyer for the Times, West has said he was looking forward to watching The Dream Whisperer, the documentary about his former teammate Dick Barnett. He remarked that he was looking forward to something that's accurate and positive portrayal of the team, not so subtly referring to HBO's Winning Time. In a letter he sent via his attorney, Lewis R. Miller, last week, suggested the team behind the series, which includes Adam McKay at the helm, which, by the way, was one of the writers for that big climate film that David Sirota was involved in, that was on Netflix. Replaced the real Jerry West with his polar opposite. He accused the creators of portraying the dramatization as genuine, which he argued thereby violated the law. The letter requested a retraction of Winning Time's false depiction of Jerry West, indicating that legal action was on the horizon. The series made us all look like cartoon characters, West told Dwyer, confirming his plans to take legal action if he deems it necessary. They belittled something good. If I have to, I will take this all the way to the Supreme Court. West is portrayed by Jason Clarke in the series, which has also received the criticism for alleged inaccuracy from Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Look, if you're building a series, you're going to have some things that are a bit altered in order to make things more entertaining for the average viewer. I mean, if you wanted something that tried to be close to as accurate as possible, maybe you should have gotten involved and demanded for a documentary instead. A lot like that Michael Jordan and the Bulls dynasty 30 for 30. If that was the type of thing you wanted, maybe you should, maybe if you had gotten involved and put your criticism out soon enough, HBO would have done something more like that, because HBO's capable of creating sports documentaries as well. HBO defended the show last week following criticism. HBO has a long history of producing compelling content drawn from actual facts and events that are fictionalized in part for dramatic processes. Read HBO's response, which was provided to the Hollywood Reporter earlier this week. Winning Time is not a documentary and is not presented as such. However, the series and its depictions are based on extensive factual research and reliable sourcing. And HBO stands resolutely behind our talented creators and cast who have brought a dramatization of this epic chapter in basketball history to the screen. The show is partially based on Jeff Pearlman's book Showtime Magic Kareem, Riley and the LA Lakers Dynasty of the 1980s. In a recent interview with Complex, Magic Johnson talked about his Apple TV docuseries, They Call Me Magic, and how it's real Showtime, real truth about what happened, which was seemingly a reference to the HBO series. Quincy Isaiah, who portrays Magic in the show, told TMZ earlier this month the show was not made with any intended malice. And I mean, I understand where they're coming from because it's a story about their lives, Isaiah said, so it's tough. But I really feel like we did a really good job of showing humans and showing a full version of who we at least perceive them to be, he continued. There's no malice behind it. So this is really stupid in my opinion, because if Jerry West is serious about this, then they're going to distract this Supreme Court from doing more pro-corporate protections. And even though at the same time we've also seen that another type of celebrity case that will get people distracted in some form of way. Like, even though, and we're seeing that right now with the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case, that I think some type of high profile celebrity cases do distract people from focusing on the real important issues at hand in society, like all the destruction of the declining quality of life here in the United States and all the imperialism that takes place at the hands of the United States to make life worse for people abroad. And this is the type of thing that can evolve into another distraction, which, if this does happen, then you're going to see the United States do some really nefarious shit if this case ever did go to court. And you're going to notice that a lot of people are not going to notice that it happened. Like, for example, when the United States said that they're going to provide $33 billion more to Ukraine. I wonder how many people did not notice that because they were focused on that Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case, and it's also the time of the year where where 3 of the 4 sports are going on at the same time. But not all people are capable of showing the ability to focus on a multitude of things at the same time. So it's important to point out, like, stuff like this will be a petty distraction, and it also shows how fragile some of the people from the Showtime Lakers were over things that were done to alter the show to make it more interesting for the regular viewer. So I'd like to thank y'all for coming out for another episode of the Rochford Files, hosted by yours truly, Andrew Rochford. And I hope that y'all will have a good rest of your Sunday night. And I've got a big week ahead. I'll have to look into that, Kelly. I haven't been on Twitter a lot today, so I did not notice that. But my next show will either Tuesday or Thursday will be the next show. And got to work on setting up guest times for people for the next shows. I will, yes, have a good week as well, Kelly. Yeah, I think I will have to try to do both Tuesday and Thursday because I don't think I'll be able to do a Saturday afternoon stream this weekend. I have my brother's birthday party to go to, so I would have to do another Sunday stream next week instead. But the normal ideal routine would be to do Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday streams. But with that being said, please like, share, and subscribe to the Rochford Files. And also try to be connected on multiple platforms. I'm also on Twitch and Odyssey and Rumble, which is where I do post-show uploads for. Oh, I wish I'll take a photo of. I'll share a photo of the dog before the next stream. My mom doesn't like her dog to go upstairs. Well, I'll be sure to share a photo of. She's a black German Shepherd. Her name is Crystal. With that being said, this is Andrew Rochford saying goodbye and good night.